Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, the 23rd chapter, which the Lord addresses, a great dealings of the false prophets that were misleading his people, and using or feigning themselves to be in positions of influence and using that to scatter the Lord's flock or the Lord's sheep, right, which is a metaphor for the nation or the Lord's people. So this is Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 1. And, this is something that was prevalent during the time of Jeremiah. It was prevalent before his time. It was prevalent after his time. And is prevalent in our time today. Okay. So there are certain things where, it's the same spirits playing the same roles coming back in the different generations. And so long as they continue to fulfill that lot, the Lord will continue to bring that judgment upon them. It's like the laws of the Lord telling you not to commit adultery, all right, because the penalty of that is death. And then you commit it 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago or today, you'd still get the same judgment, right? In the sense that the Lord, that's an infraction, right? That the Lord is going to exact upon you if you don't repent or if he doesn't have mercy on you. Let me say it that way. So this is Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 1. Woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. Now, typically when people see the word pastors, they immediately think of the Christian church and the good portion of the false teachers in there. But the word pastor goes into like a shepherd, right? So as it says here, right, a shepherd, to pasture, herdsman, shepherd. And in this case, it is the Lord is likening those that were, like the prophets, the priests, the rulers, who would be in the stead of shepherds compared to the sheep, which the regular people. The Lord says, woe unto them, right, that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. So how were they doing that? By telling lies and misleading the people, by using their outward appearance of righteousness or divinely inspired messages to mislead the Lord's people, which he likened unto his sheep being scattered, saith the Lord Yahweh. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel. Now, note that as the prophets, would speak, they would either suffix their message, based on what the Lord said with saith the Lord, or therefore, thus saith the Lord. And then they would give the message. So keep that in mind, because it's gonna, we're gonna reference that again as we continue to go through the chapter. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel, against the pastors that feed my people, or the overseers over my people, ye have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not visited them. Okay, so rather than to tend to them, right, and watch over them and protect them, as it goes into visited, they've basically misled them, and in the spirit, right, and then just sort of just forsaken the flock of the Lord. And as if a shepherd was to do that to his actual sheep, they would end up scattered in different areas, not gathered and not cared for. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doings, saith the Lord Yahweh. So the Lord is saying he's gonna bring recompense for this doing that the Lord perceives as evil. And I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries whither I have driven them. So the remnant of the Lord's flock are the remnant of his people, which are the elect. Okay, so this Jeremiah 23:3 would, when its fullness be fulfilled, right, in our time, when by the word the Lord would gather the remnant, right, or the elect. As it says, whither I have driven them, So the different nations, right, the different parts, the four corners of the earth that Israel was scattered, and bring them again to their folds. Now, a fold for actual sheep is like a enclosement, right, or a camp where you would keep your sheep, like a pen, a sheep pen. So, in other words, to the sheep, it was like their home, right, where they would stay when you let them out to go and graze, and then eventually they would return back to that fold. So here, that fold is synonymous or symbolic for our habitation here, which would be the land of Israel. And they shall be fruitful and increase, meaning we're going to populate. And I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more. So shepherds being the true shepherds, right, and overseers over the Lord's people, which shall feed them, and firstly with this word, right, to nourish them properly, not for the gain of the shepherd, right, at the expense of the sheep. And they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, right? And lacking meaning they're not going to want for anything, saith the Lord Yahweh. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord Yahweh, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, that branch meaning a descendant, right? When you look at the term family tree, okay, when you look at a family tree, the members of the family are sort of drawn either as like roots or like a branch, okay, which signifies a descendant. So the Lord is saying he will raise up unto David, meaning from the line or the lineage of David, a righteous branch, which would be an individual or somebody that would come from the line of David, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. And this king is Yahushua, okay, the Messiah, which was prophesied to come from the line of David. And this is one example here as well. And he shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. So he's going to bring about proper order. In his days, Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely. So we know that this, though the Lord did come on the scene, right, give or take around 2,000 years ago, that's also with like precepts like this, it also shows why the disciples thought that at the time when Yahushua was on the scene then would be when he would save and restore Israel. Because when you read prophecies like this in the book of Jeremiah, you would think, because it says in his days, you would think that, oh, well, if the Messiah is here, then that must mean that this is the time of the fulfillment of these prophecies. Okay, but this is actually referring not to when he came back 2,000 years ago, but in our time now. And we know that now because it's now when the Lord makes his return, his second return, that he is going to fully deliver, right, Judah and Israel, which is the entire nation, but starting with the elect. Okay, and that's when we're going to dwell safely, because even at the time when Yahushua came on the earth, over 2,000 years ago, the word was starting to be preached, but the nation wasn't saved, and the northern kingdom wasn't in the land, right? Because shortly after Yahushua's time, what happened? You had the Jewish-Roman wars and all these atrocities that were happening to our people still. Okay, so this Jeremiah 23:6 wasn't fulfilled yet. It says here, and this is his name whereby he shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. Now, when you look into, I think righteous is Tazadak, right? So it's like, really should be Ha-Adawan, Tazadak Nawa, right? But when you look into the word here, yeah, Tazadak Nawa, it's Yahweh as they have it. But we know that this is really referring to Yahushua, because the Most High didn't come from the branch of David, right? The Most High didn't come from the lineage or the line of David. Yahushua did. So really, that should be Adawan, right? Or it should be Yahushua. Verse 7, therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord Yahweh, that they shall no more say, the Lord liveth, which brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But the Lord liveth, which brought up and led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country. Now, what this is saying is the times are going to come where when people think of the God of Israel, they think of the God that delivered Israel out of Egypt, because it was such a monumental event that happened. But his deliverance of the seed of Israel, the house of Israel, the elect from the north country, is going to far surpass that it will overshadow the deliverance out of Egypt. And when people think about the Lord and Israel, they're gonna think first about the deliverance out of the north country before that of Egypt. Now, this north country isn't referring to ancient Babylon at the time, but rather now in our time. Okay, so the north country being Babylon or America today. And from all countries whither I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land. And this hasn't been fulfilled yet, because Israel is still scattered in these different countries and these different parts of the world. Verse 9, mine heart within me is broken. This is Jeremiah speaking, because of the prophets, dealing with the false prophets. All my bones shake. I am like a drunken man, and like a man whose wine or whom wine hath overcome. So Jeremiah is basically saying, he's distraught, right, with the level of yeah, you know what? Let me not even use that word. He's just distraught with the level of wickedness going on in the land. Let's keep it simple. And he's basically being poetic with it, right, about the bone shaking. But he describes himself as one, like when somebody is so drunk that they're overwhelmed, right, with the influence of the alcohol. Jeremiah likens himself to being in a state like this, but being overwhelmed with the words that the Lord is speaking concerning the land and the false prophets and the things he was getting ready to do. As he says, I am like a drunken man, and like a man whom wine hath overcome, because of the Lord Yahweh, and because of the words of his holiness. For the land is full of adulterers, for because of swearing, false swearing, the land mourneth, right? So the bulk of the people are adulterers, right? They don't fear the Lord. They live after their own pleasures. And because of their lying oaths, you could say, the land mourneth, meaning through the wickedness they were committing, the Lord would bring judgment, and both them and the land would suffer, right, because of the judgment. The pleasant places of the wilderness are dried up, and that's dealing with like the different regions and different areas where it would have greenery or good pasture due to the different punishments the Lord would bring, whether it's like drought or famine and so on, or wildfires. It would cause the land itself to suffer, right? And when it mentions these places being dried up, meaning they've basically like withered away, they're not fruitful as they used to be. And their course is evil, right? Meaning their intentions, their actions, and their force or their might, once again, going into their intentions and actions, is not right. So they don't move with good intentions, but rather that of a wicked mind, of an ungodly individual. For both prophet and priest are profane. See, and these were people, prophets and priests were some of the holiest people, right? Because they were close to the Lord. The priests serving the Lord, right, and teaching, leading the people in the right ways as per the Lord. So they had that influence, and the prophets being the mouthpieces of the Lord, which would speak the words of the Lord. Once again, they had the influence of the Lord. So as it says, yea, in my house have I found their wickedness, saith the Lord. So it wasn't just like in the groves or in the high places or in secret places, but even in the temple, right? They were doing certain wickedness, ways opposed to what the Lord Yahweh had commanded our people to do in worshiping him, all right, and in dwelling in the land. Verse 12, wherefore their way shall be unto them as slippery ways in the darkness. Okay, now obviously this is metaphorical, but it's representing them not having stability, right, and ultimately meeting their demise. Because if you have somebody on a slippery path, okay, they can't get a good footing, right? They're susceptible to fall. Okay, and if on top of that it's dark, now you don't have direction, you can't see, so you're at a major disadvantage. But the Lord goes on to say, they shall be driven on and fall therein. Okay, so when you when you look at this in the NLT, right, it says here, they will be chased through the dark and they will fall. See, for I will bring disaster upon them at the time fixed for their punishment. So the Lord is likening the way that they're gonna fall and basically have no chance of escaping this judgment or surviving it, like somebody who's being chased in a dark, slippery path where they can't see anything and they can't, and they're already slipping and falling. For I will bring evil upon them, even the year of their visitation. And the year of their visitation would be the appointed time where the Lord would bring this, would visit them with this judgment, saith the Lord Yahweh. Note that again, right? Saith the Lord. And I have seen folly in the prophets of Samaria. They prophesied in Baal and caused my people Israel to err. So the Lord is saying, going back to what was happening, while when the northern kingdom were still in their land, the Lord is recounting how he saw the false prophets prophesying in the name of Baal, right, and leading the people astray. I have seen also in the prophets of Jerusalem an horrible thing. They commit adultery and walk in lies. And this shouldn't be something that surprises you, because even till today you have people that do that, right? That call call themselves prophets or teachers, and they do these things, right? The very things they preach against. As it says, and walk in lies. They strengthen also the hands of evildoers. And how do they do that? By prophesying good concerning them, because they would gain a reward, right, for it. So if they spoke good of somebody, even though the person was evil, by the appearance of a prophet or of influence, they would then, gain favor with that person, right? And as it says, they strengthen the hands of evildoers, because if you're doing wickedness and prophets are speaking good about you, right, false prophets, but they're speaking good about you, you're going to continue to do that, right? They're not reproving or rebuking them for their evil doings. And that none doth return from his wickedness. See, they are all of them unto me as Sodom, and the inhabitants thereof as Gomorrah. Now, the Lord looked at Sodom and Gomorrah as a place so abominable it was worthy of destruction. A destruction so devastating that it was used as an example for anybody that should live ungodly after them. And the Lord is likening the wickedness of Israel and the state that they have fallen into at this point to how Sodom and Gomorrah was, warranting their judgment. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts concerning the prophets, behold, I will feed them with wormwood. It's dealing with the false prophets. Wormwood is like, bitterness, right? Or contamination, and make them drink the water of gall. Once again, it's not literal per se, but this is just a poetic way of saying that the Lord would bring evil upon them, right? Which evil meaning a bad time. But if you're causing somebody to drink wormwood, right, or contaminated or bitter waters, or causing them to drink gall, which goes into like venom or poison, then clearly it's not for their benefit, right? That's bringing evil upon them. For from the prophets of Jerusalem is profaneness gone forth into all the land. So due to these false prophets going around, they were profaning the land via the lies that they were telling, but people would believe them because they played the role, right, as prophets. It's just like how, like today, you have a lot of false prophets, a lot of men doing wicked things. You had one example being Al-Azhar, right? Proclaimed themselves to be these men inspired of the Lord. Meanwhile, they were just causing more profanation. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, hearken not unto the words of the prophets that prophesy unto you. They make you vain. See, So don't listen to the things they're telling you, because they're leading you astray. They're causing you to follow after ways that the Lord himself has not ordained. They speak a vision of their own heart. So the visions that they tell you that they've seen is things that they imagined, things that they came up with, and not out of the mouth of the Lord. The Lord didn't actually tell them these things or reveal it unto them. They just made it up. They say still unto them that despise me, the Lord Yahweh hath said, ye shall have peace. So they still are continuing to strengthen the hands of those that despise the Lord, i.e. the wicked, with peaceful words, telling them that the Lord, the Lord said, nah, they're going to be good. They're going to continue to prosper, and so on and so forth. The Lord is with you. And they say unto every one that walketh after the imagination of his own heart. So those that, rather than following the ways of the Lord, they want to do what they want to do. These false prophets would speak smooth things onto them. It's kind of like the modern day Christian church. You can have all manner of wickedness go up in there. So long as they're paying their tithes and collection, the pastor will tell them that, God loves them and they're going to be all right. Anybody in here that's suffering, the Lord is going to change and turn your life around. Anybody that's, they're poor, you're going through financial woes, don't worry about it. The Lord is going to flip it all around. Next year is going to be your year. All that, guess what? They're doing this. Okay. And they say unto every one that walketh after the imagination of his own heart, they do what they what they want to do. No evil shall come upon you. So you're gonna be all right. They're not in there telling them that if you a sodomite, the Most High is gonna bring judgment upon you. If you're committing adultery, the Most High is gonna bring judgment, because they themselves are committing adultery with the women in the congregation. Verse 18. For who hath stood in the counsel of the Lord Yahweh, and hath perceived and heard his word? Right. So these false prophets going around saying this, that, and the third, which one of them has actually been in the counsel of the Lord and heard what the words of the Lord actually, are saying? Who hath marked his word and heard it? Behold, a whirlwind of the Lord Yahweh is gone forth in fury. So the Lord's fury is going out like a whirlwind, even a grievous whirlwind. It shall fall grievously upon the head of the wicked. Now, if you ever see like a tornado, for example, and you see how if you watch how it goes and it rips through, and I'm talking about buildings and houses, right? And these are like houses that have been built with a foundation. And if you look at how the wind picks it up and just tosses it somewhere, you'd see the the intensity of it. Something so heavy and so stable can just be lifted up lightly and just spun around and spit out somewhere. As it says, it shall, and the Lord likens that, right, to his judgment. It shall fall grievously upon the head of the wicked, right? So those that were, at least at this point, being wicked, the Lord would liken his judgment like a whirlwind upon them. Right, which in this time the Lord is going to do the same thing, except the whirlwinds that are going to come are going to be by fire, by way of his chariots that he's going to have with the Yahushua and the angels coming in. And in this time, the head of the wicked is not going to be just wicked Israelites. Right, it's going to be wicked Israelites, heathens included. Verse 20: the anger of the Lord Yahweh shall not return, meaning he's not gonna call his anger back to him to calm down or to turn away from it until he have executed, until he have performed the thoughts of his heart. So if the Lord sees you doing wickedness, he gets angry and he says, I'm gonna do this, that, and the third to you. He wasn't gonna stop and say, you know what, let me just chill. No. Until he has done this, that, and the third to you, his anger would not cease. In the latter days, ye shall consider it perfectly. So at their time, the latter days was the days as the closest days to that point of that judgment, right? That time of their visitation. Because when it started to come upon them, then they started to consider, oh shit, maybe what Jeremiah was saying was true after all. Like, this ain't looking too good for us, right? But also, like I mentioned in the beginning of the lesson, how, the addition is always addition, regardless of the numbers, right? It works the same way. So with the wickedness that our people have been doing even up until this very day, the Lord has they have incurred the wrath of the Lord, which he's going to execute upon them in this time as well. Okay, so he's going to perform the intents and the thoughts of his heart, which he has revealed to his men via these scriptures and in the visions and so on, in these latter days as well, which these are the ultimate latter days. And in this time, yeah, you're going to have people, as it says, ye shall consider it perfectly, but that moment of realization is only going to be to your anguish, because you're going to realize how deep of trouble you're in. Verse 21, I have not sent these prophets, yet they ran. I have not spoken to them, yet they prophesied. All right, so they, of their own will, not being called or inspired of the Lord, but of their own will, they went out and spoke the things of their own heart, not the true message of the Lord. But if they had stood in my counsel and had caused my people to hear my words, see, had they actually been messengers of the Lord, following the ways of the Lord, listening to the true message of the Lord and actually teaching that to the people of the Lord, then they should have turned them from their evil way and from the evil of their doings. See, because then by doing so and teaching the right thing, they would have been able to at least cause Israel to leave off from their evil ways and their wicked ways, right? And their wicked doings. But they caused them to further indulge in it by prophesying lies unto them, smooth words. Am I a God at hand, saith the Lord Yahweh, and not a God afar off? Right, the scriptures tell you that the Most High is a God that hideth himself, meaning that he's not readily available just to anybody, where you can just get up and say, oh yeah, the Lord gave me a dream. Oh yeah, I spoke to the Lord last night. You know, he told me this, that, and the third. Right, he's only at hand, or he makes himself known unto those that he decides to make himself known unto. Can any hide himself in secret places that I shall not see him? So is there anywhere you can hide yourself, you know, or even your thoughts that the Lord wouldn't know? Saith the Lord, do not I fill the heaven and earth, saith the Lord? So is not my presence everywhere? Hence omniscient, or omnipresent. I have heard what the prophets said, that prophesy lies in my name, saying, I have dreamed, I have dreamed. See, so the Lord is saying that the lies that they were going around saying, oh, I had a dream, the Lord revealed to me in this vision that this is what he's going to do, or this is what this is, you know, this person is going to do this and have this. The Lord is saying they were lies, because he didn't give them any of those dreams. How long shall this be in the heart of the prophets that prophesy lies? So how long are they going to continue to be this way and follow after this vain deceptive practices? Yea, they are prophets of the deceit of their own heart. See, they're not prophets of the Lord. They're prophets prophesying after the lying ways that they come up with in their minds, which think to cause my people to forget my name by the dreams which they tell every man to his neighbor. Because by prophesying or telling people things according to what they imagine, they're not telling people to follow the ways of the Lord and the practices of the Lord. And in Israel going astray and not keeping the practices and the ways of the Lord, they would eventually forget about the Lord, right? And rather than keeping his name in remembrance. As it says here, as their fathers have forgotten my name for Baal. So just like their forefathers, right, wicked Israelites that were using idolatry to lead people astray, to forget about the Lord, they were doing the same things with their false prophecies. Verse 28, the prophet that hath a dream, let him tell a dream, and he that hath my word, let him speak my word faithfully. What is the chaff to the wheat, saith the Lord, right? So the Lord is saying here, like, you know, those that claim they've had a dream, sure, let them say what they got to say. And those that are my true men, let them say what I've told them to say, right? Because regardless of that they're both speaking, there's a difference. Why one is likened unto chaff and one is likened unto wheat, saith the Lord. Is not my word like as a fire, saith the Lord, and like a hammer that breaketh the rock in pieces? See, so there's a difference between the word of the Lord and the false divination of the false prophets. Therefore, behold, I am against the prophets, saith the Lord Yahweh, that steal my words, every one from his neighbor. And this is the reason I was saying, take note of the diction or the way that, the true prophets, would speak. For example, Jeremiah, because these false prophets were using similar verbiage and diction, right? As it says, they steal my words, everyone from his neighbor, so that they could give the appearance as though they were men of the Lord, right? So they'll come saying, oh, thus saith the Lord, or therefore the Lord says, but they would suffix that with lies. All right, that's why the Lord said he is against them. Behold, I am against the prophets, saith the Lord, that use their tongues and say he saith. So they'll speak out their mouth with their own imagination, and they'll say, this is what the Lord said. Behold, I am against them that prophesy false dreams, saith the Lord Yahweh, and do tell them, and cause my people to err by their lies, and by their lightness, yet I sent them not, nor commanded them. Therefore they shall not profit these people at all, saith the Lord. And when this people or the prophet or a priest shall ask thee, saying, what is the burden of the Lord Yahweh? Now, the burden of the Lord Yahweh, in other words, is like saying, what's the message of the Lord? All right, well, what's the oracle or the prophecy that the Lord has showed you? Whenever it says the burden of the Lord, because when you read in the beginning of the writings of the prophets, you would often see the burden of the Lord, which came to this man, son of such and such, right? Which is, in other words, the message or the vision of the Lord that he gave to them. So when they ask, what's the message of the Lord? Then shalt thou say unto them, what burden? I will even forsake you, saith the Lord, right? So the Lord doesn't have any message or oracle or any of that for you, right? He will forsake you. And just like he did with Saul, they couldn't have any means of finding out the Lord's intentions because he stopped speaking to them. And as for the prophet, the priest, and the people that shall say the burden of the Lord Yahweh, I will even punish that man in his house. Now I'll read this in the NLT. It says, if any priest, a prophet, priest, or anyone else says, I have a prophecy from the Lord, I will punish that person along with his entire family. Because the Lord was saying here that no more am I going to, speak, or give them any more visions or anything of that sort, right? So nobody can go around saying that, oh, the Lord showed me this, or thus saith the Lord. And if they do, I'm going to punish them. Verse 36, and the burden of the Lord Yahweh shall ye mention no more, for every man's word shall be his burden. For ye have perverted the words of the living God, of the Lord of hosts, our God. Now read this once again in the NLT. But stop using this phrase, prophecy from the Lord, for people are using it to give authority to their own ideas, turning upside down the words of our God, the living God, the Lord of heaven's armies. So when it says here that for every man's word shall be his burden, they were basically saying they will use the name of the Lord to then speak their own lies. And that's why he says, because they perverted the words of the living God. Thus shalt thou say to the prophet, what hath the Lord Yahweh answered thee? And what hath the Lord Yahweh spoken? So if anything, ask them, what did the Lord say to you? And if they reply, right, but since ye say the burden of the Lord Yahweh, right? Oh, the Lord, thus saith the Lord, or the Lord said this, knowing damn well that the Lord didn't. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, because ye say this word, the burden of the Lord Yahweh, and I have sent unto you, saying ye shall not say the burden of the Lord. So the Lord says, nobody is to use that, that phrase, oh, the prophecy of the Lord, or thus saith the Lord, or the burden of the Lord. And then if you ask somebody, a false prophet, yo, what did the Lord say? Or what's the Lord's message? And they tell you, oh, the burden of the Lord is, or the word of the Lord is, then you're going to say to them, the Lord said that nobody should use that, right? Or should speak in that manner, because you had false prophets that would use that as a means of deceiving people and perverting his words. But since you're saying it, verse 39, therefore, behold, I, even I, will utterly forget you and will forsake you, and the city that I gave you and your fathers, and cast you out of my presence, which was by way of the judgment the Lord brought, by destroying their walls and their city, and taking them captive out of the land. And I will bring an everlasting reproach upon you, and a perpetual shame which shall not be forgotten. And that's what ended up happening, right? Imagine going from a position of royalty or nobility to that of a slave, stripped of your clothes and shackled and being sent away, abandoned by your God and having no defense in the sight of the nations, okay, at the mercy of a foreign nation, right? And that's the judgment the Lord said he would bring upon them because of the wickedness in the land, but also the perverseness of them perverting the words of the Lord, i.e., by the mouth of these false prophets. So with that, I'm going to end it here. It brings us to the end of Jeremiah 23. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.